you. Well, she had asked me to look at some things. First of all, when I was walking out of my house, I did a study years ago on the chakras, and I was told immediately to pick it up, which that's a picture of Jesus and chakras, and I grabbed it, and I haven't picked it up in years. I have a friend of mine named Ronnie Martin who is a surveyor, and when he surveys, he keeps up a lot with what goes on in the state of Arkansas. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, crops started growing completely in the state of Arkansas that no one planted. Because what he does is he comes in and clears out a whole bunch of stuff, and he builds new communities. So you got a bunch of city and new homes going up, and you've got the roots and everything going crazy because now all of a sudden stuff's growing. When they did a study on it, they found out that the forefathers had planted seeds, and that a certain angle of the moon had made these things begin to grow. So seeds of our forefathers and of the ancients are starting to grow, and he said the thing was, it was the angle of the light. And he said there's a lot of you who are angles of the light. You don't have the full revelation, but you've got a piece. And so she had asked me to look into this, and so I looked it up last night. And
The first one, even though it doesn't look like it'll write, it will.
you have the word influence. Now this is, I'm a footnote. You ever seen that in the book? I'm a footnote. I'm just a Barbara Simon's footnote. But this is chicken scratch, hillbilly. I'm from Arkansas. Don't be offended. The word influence in the 14th century meant to be influenced by the stars. It came originally from that. The French word means to be animated by the stars. In the 14th century, they took it into Latin compounds, and it meant for the star to flow into you. And then by the somewhere around the 15th century, we have what was called influenza. Now, when you look at these two words, they were forms of a Latin word that comes to the same root. And so what happened was is you had this thing going on, and it looks as if there was all of these things that were coming from astrology. So years ago, I looked up a scripture in the book of Revelation. It's the only time it's used in the New Testament, and it's the word wormwood. So I'm going to turn to the New American Standard. Revelation 8:11. I studied this years ago because I was studying chakras, and there was so much stuff that was going on the inside of me that didn't make any sense, and my Strong's just wasn't getting it. It says, verse 8:10, and the third angel sounded, and a great star fell in from heaven, burned like a torch, and it fell from a third of the rivers and the springs of waters. And the name in Greek is always nature. The nature of the star was called wormwood. Wormwood is from a Sanskrit word, and actually that Sanskrit word, if we derive our English word virus from it. When it says a third of the wormwood, many men died from the wars because they were made bitter, and a fourth angel sounded, and a third of the moon and a third of the stars become smitten, and a third of them were darkened. Do you remember her talking about that yesterday? Now, here's the thing. This word in Greek for wormwood comes back from a Greek root that means snake bitten. So now you have snake bitten, and you also have virus. In the 1960s, people began to smoke dope, do drugs. And what happened is they tapped into an energy they didn't understand. But you see, when this freedom and love came, they pushed it into the lower chakras. They didn't make it all about up here, they pushed it down here. So their misuse of a creativity created viruses. I'm going to read you a couple of scriptures out of the Bible. In Deuteronomy 29, I'll read a couple of scriptures, and we'll get back to what, like I said, I'm just a footnote. Barbara's the one that received the revelation, so she's the one that can put it all together for you. That's passing the buck in Arkansas. All right. Good company. 29. Deuteronomy 29, it says in verse 29:17, moreover, you have seen their abominations and their idols of wood, stone, silver, gold, which they had smitten. Lest one a man or a woman or a tribe among you turn away from God into their idols, and so therefore a root of poisonous fruit and wormwood. Notice wormwood and poison are distinguished. What is that telling you? That when we turn to our own ideas of God, we turn our greatest hindrance for the next view of God is the view of God we have right now. Correct? The greatest critic of the new revival is the old revival. And so you have this wormwood, which is what? The incubation. You remember the man in the soil? Fertilizer, when it is in the improper environment, is a positive thing. You put it in a negative environment and it'll blow a town away.
Look at Waco, Lordy.
Yeah, so there's things in soil that are constructive, just like there are things in the Old Testament because of the way their mindset was that judgment was constructive. Guess what? So was wormwood. There's a scripture, and I'll turn it to the book of Amos, and then I'll conclude. Somebody says, why is he in such a hurry? Because I'm into the flow more than I am the information. Because when I say these things, all this is going off in you, and that's the purpose of why I'm here. I'm not here to redo your Strongs, even though it will do that. Book of Amos. I need to turn to my index. I also grabbed a different Bible than I normally carry, and I had no idea why, but it will be revealed. Can you hold this and I'll sure. Thank you. See, this is what happens when you go to church. You get used to podiums and pulpits and all this, so then you get messed up. There it is, chapter 5. The context of chapter 5 is whenever you are going about your own way, when you're turning to the idols or the images or the imaginations, then therefore God puts you in darkness, in incubation, so the things that you need, you still are there to move you to the place above ground, below ground. So this is the text. Amos 5:6. Seek the Lord while you may live, lest he break forth in fire, O house of Joseph, and consume thee with none to quench it for Bethel. Who is Bethel? We are. You have turned justice into wormwood. In Hebrew, you have turned the mishpat, the redemptive justice of God, into wormwood. Have we not done that? Wormwood implies a curse. We've said God's cursing us because we have these false images of God. But it says, and cast righteousness into the earth. Listen to this verse in context. Who made the Pleiades and the Orion? Star system, astrology. And changes deep darkness into morning, and darkens the day into night, who calls the waters of the sea and pours them out of the surface. The Lord is his name, who shall flash destruction. I like to translate more of reconstruction upon the strong and destruction upon the fortress. What this is saying is that when we turn to our own ways, when we caught into our own idolatry, when we caught into what we are creating, the viruses that we are creating, the star systems influence us and puts us into deep darkness, puts us in the incubation, and moves us. And so the very things that in one environment would be destructive, he's got his own personal thing that is constructing you and moving you. And we're now moving into a shift that all these viruses, in the book of the Mayan calendar, it says, when the white buffalo is seen, all secrets will be revealed. I called it New Age buffet. How much stuff have we learned in the last few years? But now we're moving beyond this information and theory into a place that we can be incubated, and those very things that may be destructive to others is a part of our path, and it's moving us to new ground and new levels.
That's good.
So that's Greek and Hebrew chicken scratch for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Lynn, can I? Hello?
Can I erase this?
Yeah. Right here? saw when I heard influence and influenza was that when we are below the ground, remember the seed yesterday? That when we are in our humanity, in our egoic state, that the influence that comes from the stars affects us in the form of influenza and viruses. But when we are above ground, it causes something completely different. Do you know that when you have influenza, it's in your DNA? Did you know that? That these cosmic influences that are incoming literally affect our DNA. And this is what I'm seeing too, and I hope you can appreciate this. Who are Pink Floyd fans? Anyone remember the cover of The Dark Side of the Moon? It shows a fractal of light coming in like this. White light, but coming out in the 7 colors of the chakras. And I'm saying to you in a very, not a very good way, is that there's influence coming from the stars, from our origin, from vibration, from light, from sound coming in and is having an effect on our body. And if we remain below the soil, we'll continue to reap what we've reaped here in our human form, in the form of sicknesses, disease, arthritis, diabetes, those kinds of things. But as humanity as a whole begins to break the plane of the earth, this is not necessarily individualistic, it's corporate. As we begin to break this plane, as the tide begins to pull, as the train of Christ begins to pull those that are in captivity upward, then the influence from the stars is going to have a different effect on us. It's going to change us in our DNA. Does that make any kind of sense at all? All right, I'm going to show you another little presentation here on frequency and sound. What's coming from these star systems is frequency and sound and light. And it does have an effect on our bodies and our consciousness. Can someone work the lights while I pull this up? This demonstration will just show you what effect sound waves has on very small grains of sand. Who knows what, who understands what we're made up of? Sand, inside of sand is found everything, stardust, gold, everything, but look at the effect that this has. This may take just a second to come up.
I'm a forensic artist, worked for the San Jose Police Department from 1995.
Has anyone ever heard of cymatics?
immortality right there. And that's only what our ears can hear. What do y'all think about that? It's all over the internet. You can look at it.
Do your own research and see just the effect that sound has on the material universe. I just wanted to plant some seeds here today. Information is coming rapidly. If you leave behind the old ways of discerning through your knowledge of good and evil, if you come above the plane of the earth, then you're going to be perceiving things from a heavenly perspective. There is light coming in from star systems. Lyle and I have been seeing stars outside of our home for months now that are pulsating light. Reds, greens, blues, and you can see them with the naked eye. We've called the news organizations and they're like, well, that's nice. But I'm drawn to them, and the first night that I saw one of these stars, I heard a voice tell me to go look out the back window. It was midnight, and I went out and looked out the back window, and I was mesmerized by this beautiful star. Big, beautiful, red, green, blues, golds exploding from it, and you can see it with your naked eye. And so I'm saying that to say, I know that a lot of this might sound a little weird, but we are being influenced by the stars. It is where we come from, and they are communicating with us. Divine intelligence. Remember, our word for God it limits us. Elohims, plural. There's so much that we don't know, and I don't want you to feel overwhelmed, because this stuff is not going to come from books. The information that's there readily available to you is really inside of you. And all you have to do is take time, ask the questions, and wait for the answers, because they'll come. Does this pique your interest at all? Okay, I'm gonna ask Lynn to come up and share what he has to share. This keeps on cutting out. But I'm gonna suggest, if you all want a panel again, who wasn't here yesterday afternoon for the panel? It was very good. It just gives an opportunity to ask questions, things that maybe we didn't cover that we need to cover. But maybe we can sit up again and just let you ask questions, depending upon, I don't know what Lynn wants to do, so I'm gonna yield to him.
Barbara,
Sir?
they have took Sanskrit, Hebrew, and Greek and turned it into sound. The whole Sanskrit language can be turned into sound. That's the reason why in yoga you hear them pronouncing it. And they took those three languages and vibrated it like this, and it created images. They took the English language and what we have, and it created no vibration. There's vibration in the ancient languages, and the Sanskrit language is the only language that can be turned totally into sound.
Do you get the idea that we've been dumbing down even with our language, that our language limits us? I'm sure that I've said things up here today and that other people have said that has really probably ticked somebody off. Because the language pulls you back into a doctrine or a belief system that is against
Christianese keeps us below the plane of the earth because it ties us into doctrines that no longer serve the seed where it's going. So I just want to encourage you, change the way that you speak of
To just go along, I'm not trying to interrupt you to finish. She's referring to year before last at the conference there in Dalton. That I wore a coat that was my grandfather. My grandfather was a farmer, and I so respected him, but he was Baptist to the bone, through and through. And so the things that I would share, he would think I was going to hell. But my grandfather was probably my hero. He was my mentor. He was just a lot of things. And, he was things that I thought I would probably never be, because he was just such a statue and a pillar in the community. And I wore a jacket that was his. He's been dead now, I guess, at least 30 or 30 years at least. He died when he was almost 90 as a result from a tractor accident. He was still working. He still worked the fields. He still farmed. He was strong at 90. He worked, but he had a tractor accident. He actually had left the switch on the tractor, and he had pulled up the tractor shed and got off the tractor with the switch on and got around in front of the tractor with the crank starter and hit it, and it cranked immediately and pushed him backwards and pinned him in the back of the tractor shed. He stayed pinned there for 6 hours before they found him. And as a result of that, he later had a stroke, and then he had a heart attack and died just before his 90th birthday. I passed out those. This is our conference coming up May the 31st, June the 1st, June the 2nd. And ironically, I thought about this, the conference, the first of the year. I start, okay, I need to start thinking about the conference, speakers, da-da-da. And so I didn't mention to Ray and Avis who I would have or what. I didn't mention it to anybody. And last year, we had 7 speakers, and the reason I did that was because we did the rainbow. That was our theme, the rainbow. And so because of 7 colors, the rainbow, 7 chakras, 7 energies, this little stick man, that was my purpose in doing it. But it was too much. Number one, it's too much was the finances was extreme on us, on me, because I'm not going to have you come to my place and speak, and I'm not going to bless you. I'm going to bless you, period. It just ain't going to happen. If you're going to come, you're going to be blessed. So 7 speakers, that's $3,500, $4,000 right off the get-go. And it's hard to take a small group full of that kind of money. We don't try to do that. So we have to make a lot of plans and preparations before. But this year I thought I'm going to downsize it a little bit. I'm going to limit it to 4. And so I had asked Ray and Avis, Barbara, Gary, Carol, and myself. And that doesn't mean that I excluded anybody. I hope that nobody feels that way, because there are other speakers that we've had in our conferences that I dearly love. Thank God for their ministries and what they're doing. And so everybody sees things the way they see it, and that's good. So that's the way it works. So this is our conference, and I'm inviting you folks to come, and it's amazing. This conference is the same way. That's what I was saying. That Ray and Avis put this together, and I thought, wow, this is the same. So we're going to do this again. That's awesome. We're going to do this again, and so take it to the next level. So this is going to be awesome. I don't, you never see or hear me do this, and I'm not doing this because I agree. I don't ever mention or advertise books. I have got hundreds of books. I have books, old books, ancient books, books that I got hid, don't let nobody know I got. But Alvin Boyd Kuhn, I recommend him, and I recommend this book. It's called A Rebirth of Christianity. This book was written years ago. Alvin Boyd Kuhn, he was a theologian. He was Dr. Alvin Boyd Kuhn. Generally, you don't ever see him advertising his title, Dr. Alvin Boyd Kuhn. Generally, just Alvin Boyd Kuhn. But his writing, and this book, I recommend this book. It's called The Rebirth of Christianity. It was written, I'm not sure, but he died in 63, and so I'm gonna say this book was probably written somewhere in the late 40s, maybe the early 50s. And he has a lot of different books that he's written. Some of them are hard to get, but this is just reading. This is just something to provoke you to think. And there's a lot of historical research in this book about what happened to us and why we have been stuck down here for 1,700 years. Because we need to get free from down here. We need to press through. Do you understand what I'm saying? We need to go ahead and sprout. And that jacket that I was referring to that was my grandfather's had seeds of corn in the pockets that were at least 30 to 50 years old. And I planted some of those seeds, and they grew.
Can you spell on the word the name of the chapter and the
The name of the what?
The person that wrote the book? No, not that.
Alvin Boyd Coon? Pythagoras. 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 I'm not sure. P-Y. P-H-A.
Yeah, I didn't. Thank you. And it's funny because I read about
A-R-O-G-U-S?
Pytho, no, A-G-O-U-S, O-U-R-S.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it's something to that effect.
That's fine, 'cause I was looking it up.
Pythagoras. To go to the school of Pythagoras, you had to master music and math.
Yeah, that's right.
Plato and the writings of Plato, who is an actual historical figure, actually did live. History proves that he lived. His writings prove that he lived. He was counter to the story of the Jesus story, that there is no historical record ever that there was a Jesus. It don't exist. Period. It's just not there. Now, I am not saying that Jesus wasn't real and Plato was. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that they were contemporary, and there's a lot of information about Plato. He was also from the school of Pythagoras. There's just so much. You can find a lot of that in this book right here. A lot of that. You can find this information. You can find what happened at the Council of Nicaea. You can find out what was going on with the manipulation. You can also find out that Julia, who was Constantine's nephew, who took over after Constantine was finally killed, he was a very corrupt person. He was also the father of Christianity, and you may not recognize that. He was not a Christian. He was not. And yet he brought all the bishops together to organize the Nicene Creed. And what you have in your belief system is rooted in the Nicene Creed. It just is. Because that's the Nicene Creed is a belief system. Prior to that, it was not based on a belief system. It was based on gnosis, knowing, intuitiveness. The reason that a lot of the things that I will share with you, they are intuitive. I do read a lot. I don't get all this from nowhere. I do read a lot. But a lot of the stuff I get is intuitive. It comes from meditation. And so the things that I share, you can find some in books, but a lot of it is just intuitive. It's things that, for a lot of years, just meditation or different areas. What I call, if you look at the Kabbalistic tree of life, there's 10 spheres in the Kabbalistic tree of life, and I can put those 10 spheres in this astrological sign, or I can put the 10 spheres in my stick man. And I generally do try to put the 10 spheres in my stick man because they correlate. They're there. They're the same thing. And there's one right here in the middle of the Kabbalistic tree of life. It's called the Da'at. It's not there. And the Hebrew word Da'at, it means divine intervention or divine knowledge. Or what was that word you used, Barbara?
Divine
Intrusion. That's what Da'at is. It's divine intrusion. It's where God interrupts your world and shows you something. You say, oh, God. It went beyond you. It is beyond you. But God shared it with you. Psalms 19, you should memorize this. The heavens declare, the Hebrew word kafar. Kafar. The heavens declare, Elohim. Elohim, the seven spheres. And I want to just say this. Those are just signs. God is not limited to the seven spheres because all of the spheres are God. All of them. The seven are common signs to project the information into us. And the heavens declare, kafar, that means they prophesy, they talk, and they tell. When Jesus was coming on the scene, the Magi's come. The Magi's were Egyptian astrologers. They were not Hebrew prophets. They were Egyptian astrologers. Anyway, Hebrew prophets were Egyptians.
Can you write that
Kafar,
It's hard to pronounce, but can you write that?
K-A-P-H-A-R. K or Q. You can interchange K and Q in the Hebrew. K, kafar. Listen, the word kafar, this is a phenomenal word. Kafar has to do with a divine intrusion. And you can hear it. When Barbara was talking about her and Lyle looking at those stars, there's an energy coming from. That's the kafar. It's God's prophet.